Good morning, Afropunk, beautiful people. This is Porscha at Penguin Random House, and I am thrilled to join you with another brilliant author for our closing session at Afropunk's Rock and Read. Thank you again, Afropunk, for letting us join you this year. Next year, may it be in person. Today, we're here with the incredible author and poet, Nate Marshall. Welcome, Nate. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, what's up? Thank you so much for having me. This is cool.
Oh, yes. Obviously, I have to give you as much time as possible, but I also need to give you your props because props are due. So I'm going to just introduce folks to who you are. Nate Marshall is an award-winning author, editor, poet, playwright, performer, educator, speaker, rapper. How you do this all, I do not know. He's assistant professor of English at Colorado College and himself a proud alum of Chicago Public Schools, the University of Michigan, and Vanderbilt University. Nate has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Poetry Foundation, and the University of Michigan. His book, Wild Hundreds, received the Black Caucus of the American Library Association's Award for Poetry Book of the Year and the Great Lakes College Association's New Writer Award. He is also an editor of, this is very cool, The Breakbeat Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop, and he co-curates the Breakbeat Poets series for Haymarket Books. Nate co-wrote the play No Blue Memories, The Life of Gwendolyn Brooks with Eve Ewing, and the audio drama Bruh Rabbit and the Fantastic Telling of Remington Ellis Esquire. His last rap album, Grown, came out in 2015 with his group Daily Lyrical Product, and his latest book, Finna, went on sale this summer, published by One World Random House. And this is only a part of what you do and have accomplished. So again, thank you so much, Nate, for taking time from all of this to join us today.
No, thank you for having me. That's great.
Okay, to kick us off, would you treat us to an excerpt from your latest masterpiece?
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I'll read this. Before we were talking about like New York and rap and whatever. So this is a poem for Justin. Because you asked for one when I told you to stop jumping on me that night as I was writing. Because your favorite Jay-Z song is December 4th for his mother's voice and Jay's story about his life. Because I told you the first song you heard in your young life was I used to love her in the hospital room with my big headphones over your soft head. Because you asked me your first word and I said I didn't know, and I could have told you a good lie and made that a small poem we shared. Because when you spend the night, you take my clothes and drape them over yourself like a prayer shawl. Because you clown me to my friends and impersonate me in a way that says, I see you, uncle. Because you ask me if I love all books since I have so many, and I say, only the ones that tell us who we are. Because I ask you what I should write about, and you say, write about us. Cool.
Wow. There's a reason that you've received all the awards that you have the deals that you have in place. Like, what a gift. And thank you for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you.
That inspires me to kind of skip around where I was thinking about our questions, like, why do you write? Like, where does this come from for you? How is it that when someone close to you asks you a question, your response to it is in poetic form? How did that happen?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I would say I'm a reader. And that really comes from my maternal grandmother who sort of helped raise me. She was a librarian. She came from Montgomery, Alabama, and like moved up north, first to Detroit, then to Chicago. But yeah, when I was a kid, she was just always putting books in my hand and always just like letting me sort of explore language in that way, regardless. Yeah, like I was telling someone the other day about like I remember like being at camp like far too young. Maybe I was like 12 or something. I remember because Nelly was popular, so it had to be about that age. And reading the book Pimp by Iceberg Slim and like walking around with it at like summer camp at Northwestern, which is like, if you know anything about that book, it's like not a book a 12-year-old really should like have.
Not at all. And in public, you're showing people that
Yeah.
you're reading this.
Yeah. In fact, I think I had the book was like, it was kind of an ill color. It was like pink and brown. And I had a shirt that kind of matched it. That this is why I remember the Nelly thing, because the shirt said Pimp Juice, and it had a little card and it said "Good to the last drop." And so I would like coordinate my book with my fit. But I just remember like, but that was sort of my grandma's way. She was like, "Look, if you want to read something, I will make it available to you because I believe like reading to be a sort of to be a kind of unmitigated good, even if I personally don't love what you're reading or wouldn't read it myself. Like the fact that you're exploring like that has an inherent value. So yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of where at least the initial like root of it comes.
Mm-hmm. And then did you grow up always excelling in English, like, and your teachers constantly poured into that gift and thereby you were able to develop the art of writing it for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I had great teachers, especially like my kind of middle school English teacher, Mrs. Cap. We still talk. I like sent her whenever I like produce a new book. I always like mail it to her now. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it was definitely that. Though the one part of like school that I never understood, like English specifically, was pronunciations.
Given where we started, I'm cracking up.
Yeah, I think it's like maybe because I like grew up listening to too much rap, and I was like, yeah, you could pronounce the word this way or that way. I don't know, like, I understand the word is Philadelphia, but sometimes like, Black Thought will pronounce it Philadelphia, and like that seems as valid, like what he's talking about, so it's not like a wrong pronunciation.
Not who am I to tell Black Thought that he is wrong in pronunciating pretty much anything?
Right, absolutely, right, right. Just who am I to tell Black Thought anything?
Anything, period. Fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, just because that's like my first natural-ish opportunity for me to ask this question, I'll do it this way. Is Black Thought in your top 5 MCs?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Black Thought to me, okay, like I don't even think it's a hot take. I think it's just like the correct opinion. I think Black Thought is objectively the greatest MC in history. I think he's just, I just think that's it. Like, I don't know anybody has like the Roots don't have a bad album. That's crazy. Like what who do we know who has produced that much stuff and all of it has been like quality, right? Come on, he's great live. He like, yeah, I mean, like a lot of rappers won't get on tracks with him because they're like, hold on, man, like I'm not like, come on.
Who else accompanies him in your, I split it up. I would give you top 5s if you were curating this list in 1999 and top 5 if you were curating it now with no one on that original list.
Oh, wow, that's super. Oh, damn. Okay. Okay, I like that question. All right, top 5 in 99. Okay, I gotta think back. All right. Because 99 is hard because 99 is like before, like it's pre-Blueprint Jay-Z. It's like like Nas's kind of re-rise, right, with the with Stillmatic or whatever. So you just miss a lot of good things. All right, my top 5 in 99, I'll say Rakim, Biggie, Ice Cube. The Miseducation is 99. So Lauryn Hill.
Yes.
And Common.
Interesting, because you could still have Black Thought in the 99 version unless you're saving him for the 2020 list.
I'm saving him because like for me, like a lot of I mean, yeah, the Roots have a legendary run in the 90s, but I sort of love like the second run, like kind of right before and like when they do the Def Jam deal.
Yeah.
So everything kind of from Phrenology through, I guess, up to present, but specifically I'm thinking like, what is it? Phrenology through Undone is like a kind of legendary run. And like Thought has all the like streams of Thought joints too. So I love those. All right, so now my 2001, gotta be Kendrick, Black Thought. Man, Kendrick, Black Thought. This is hard.
You saved Jay-Z from the 90s.
Yeah, I guess I'll say Jay. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, Jay's fine. I love Jay-Z. There's a lot of bad Jay-Z music, if we're being
Yes, if we're being honest. I can't believe I said this. I'm admitting this publicly.
Yeah, so you know, that's like, it's hard. It's hard, you know, whatever. Jay-Z, Andre 3000 and Scarface. We'll go Scarface. Why not?
Okay. Yeah. Midwest stand up. Yeah. Like I don't know a whole lot of New Yorkers who put face. Like we will definitely give props and celebrate influence, and even thinking, especially from a Def Jam connection, like Def Jam South, like for sure. But rising to the level of a top 5, that's rarity.
Yeah, that's because New Yorkers don't listen to nobody.
Why do we have to? I mean, no, except for like educational purposes and being wonderful citizens of the world. But like, if it's happening on your block, it's happening on your block.
I mean, look, that's fair. Look, if I were a New Yorker, perhaps you would not be able to tell me anything either. But it's just funny because New Yorkers always like, they're just like shocked that things happen other places. It's kind of my favorite thing, like, because it's so like New York is so cosmopolitan and such an international place that it almost becomes like provincial again, because people like don't know, you know, they're like, if the shit is in Jersey, it's like too far for them to like which is a profound, and New Yorkers don't understand it, but like that's a profoundly small town way of like seeing the world. It's like,
wow,
you're concerned about my city.
Wow, you're so right. And we don't, because we think of ourselves as the capital of the world. So there's nothing small about it. Huh. Okay. I'm appreciating this.
Yeah, I love New Yorkers. But y'all, yeah, New Yorkers are like comical. I love them.
Okay. So we know who your tops are. Who are your top poets? Your top 5 Black poets?
Oh man, okay, damn. You know, nobody ever asked me this question. Maybe because like it'll hurt people's feelings. I don't know.
Well, okay, and also I'll say this, right? Like we're saying top 5 as a convention. This is top 5 coming to mind right now. Right?
I don't care. It's fine. Look. I'm not here to make friends. It's fine. I mean, everybody knows I love them. God bless. Okay. I mean, Gwendolyn Brooks for me is like, she is like, yeah, that's like, she's the greatest poet I think the United States has ever produced. That's my humble opinion. Damn. Okay. Brooks, Lucille Clifton. Damn. I mean, Langston Hughes, just for like, yeah, I think he's important. Man. See, it's good. The historical stuff is easier because people can't get mad at you.
Right.
When you start naming like people living,
contemporaries,
and it's like, And then I'll probably say Terrence Hayes, Denez Smith. Like, is that right? Is that how I feel? I'll go with that. I kind of think like Denez for like our generation has to be that sort of person, at least at this point, because they're so like so prolific and just so fucking good, and like I think have a particular, they're working in a particular tradition that for me is like really sits at the center of what Black poetry is, like thinking about like the kind of influence of like a deeply held spirituality, um thinking about like the secular and the sacred, like all that kind of stuff, like, and the shit is just funky like that, like that for me is like the sort of like Black creative tradition in this country, like period. And Dinez like embodies that in a particular way. Yeah, and Hayes is just like, you know, I mean, I don't know, like he's just important. He's just so important. Like he's maybe been the kind of, if you had to pick one, which is sort of silly, but like if you had to pick one, I would say like he has maybe defined Black poetics in the 21st century more than anyone else. Yeah. Yeah, whatever. It's fine.
So you highlighted two things. One being we're shifting the paradigm, right, from there having to be one to no, we're rejecting that. We know that there is room for everyone at the table. Yeah. And so now that's making me rethink even the top fives, right? And that, well, if we're moving away from there's only room for these five into they have paved a way for us all to be able to deliver this art that is deeply meaningful, relevant, and can connect us to something bigger, then does that also have to shift? And then the second thing being around, so I just stated it out there, top five Black poets, right? And then you talk about the Black creative tradition, especially with that intersection of the sacred and the daily. Do you consider yourself a Black poet, Black author, Black editor, Black educator first? Or do you consider yourself a poet, an activist, an author who just happens to be Black and writes with that POV?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I don't. Me and my partner, we were watching this interview with Robert Hayden, who could if he's right outside the top five. I love Hayden, but like I think, you know, and he famously kind of like pushes back against this notion of like I'm a Black poet. He's like, I'm a poet who happens to be Afro-American is his preferred parlance, but like I'm cool, you know, whatever. I'm cool. I'm Black. Like that's what it is. Like it's fine. But I do think, yeah. So I do think that I step into the work from like that particular perspective, and it's also just like true that that's how people are gonna like read the stuff regardless, right? Yeah, like when I was in undergrad and in workshops, you know, people would be like, "Oh, this is so gritty and this is so raw." I'm like, "It's a love poem. What are you talking about?" Or like, "This is a." I mean, cool, whatever. And so there are ways that, you know, unless I was like publishing anonymously, people are always sort of reading identity into the work. And, you know, I guess with me, like my impulse then is not to like shrink from that or to be like, whatever, but I'm kind of like, and maybe this is because I come from a performance tradition. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me play on these expectations, or let me like think about how I can, like, that's another thing I can use, right? You know, so like there's a poem in here in the book called African American Literature that sort of, yeah, that sort of speaks to that speaks to like the way that people, you know, read all this other stuff into the work, whether or not it's there, or even if it is there, like overemphasizing it because they're eager to read African American work as sociological rather than purely artistic. But I don't, you know, I can't really control that. It ain't got nothing to do with me. So God bless them.
So part of it, the way that it's come up and the discourse has changed, right? It's changed in my business over the past couple of years, right? And I think that certainly there was a time where, well, I'll say it in the positive. Right now, we can definitely think of Blackness in particular and the American experience of Blackness as en vogue in a certain way, right? That wasn't always the case. And actually, there's some, and Paul Coates, Ta-Nehisi Coates' father, and I have had the opportunity to discourse about this and the kind of cycle of Black popularity in the American zeitgeist, right? And there's a point when it's not at its peak where celebrating someone as a Black author, there are people who can respond to you and say, well, that is making your market too small, right? You are then saying that that is niche and we're not necessarily inviting everybody to the table to experience this art if we deem it Black first. And so that's why I like asking this question. Say that again.
Why does everybody have to experience it? I mean, the thing that I think about is like endemic in what you're saying is about that kind of limiting audience thing is that, I mean, one, well, yeah, it's the idea that like a Black audience is somehow less valuable than other audiences, which I don't think is true. Like, I don't know, you know. So, you know, and also like this I also think the thing I would take issue with that framing as well is this idea that if something is marked or marketed as specifically Black, that other people will somehow not access it. And like actually for me, like one of the real through lines of Blackness in this country, right, and in kind of the Western world, is that everyone sort of thinks they own it or can like say something authoritative about it in ways that I don't think happen with other kind of subject positions, other kind of cultural positions, so naturally, so easily. And maybe this comes from like, you know, being this sort of this, you know, kind of foundational to how this country thinks about Black people is a set of individuals or, you know, a sort of collective mass of people who produce stuff for everyone else, right? Or for the uses of everyone else. And so even if I say, look, this is hella Black, this is the Blackest thing on earth, nobody else should read it. If anything, that will only like make more of the sort of quote unquote mainstream audience or non-Black folks be like, oh, what y'all up to over there? Like, let me see, let me read it, let me da-da-da-da-da. So, you know, yeah, I mean, like, what is hip hop? But like, you know, this space of where like a lot of like Black folks, both like, you know, African American and throughout the diaspora, are like making stuff, and then other people are like become interested in like consuming that stuff and that experience, even when it has nothing to do with them, right? Even when it has nothing to do with like how they, you know, have come to know the world or see the world or whatever, like, you know.
Okay, I fully agree with you, and I think that's certainly representative of changes in who the curators are in certain media spaces, right? If that had been, well, anyway, I'm going to stop before I get myself in trouble.
If I can, I'll keep going.
Please do.
I think the thing that happens now maybe is that because the curation is like a bit better, right? Because there are folks like yourself and like Nicole and you know, EMB and Chris and like all these kinds of folks doing good work specifically in the publishing space. But I think you see, you know, kind of your analogs across many fields now, right? Who have been able to like who are a step past like the sort of first generation of folks, right? You know, so y'all aren't like Miss Morrison, where it's like, oh, you're like the first Black editor that we know of, right? Or whatever. Like not being able to be a little bit past that, and hold some institutional power and wield some institutional power has helped because people are always going to consume Black things, but whether or not like the folks that are, how can I say this? Whether or not those folks like move with integrity and also like have a like deep and loving and nuanced relationship with Black culture is the question, right? And so so I think about the kind of cultural work that y'all do is really vital because without that work, the consumption happens the same, but it happens in a really different way. And that way much more, that approaches the sort of American lineage of the minstrel show, right? It's recreating those dynamics.
Yep. Thank you for putting it so beautifully. Thank you. So okay, on that lane, the spaces that you're occupying, a lot of our spaces following the murder of George Floyd, following the murder of Breonna Taylor, we started to see, especially on social media, like Black squares are popping up everywhere, and every corporation is making a moment of solidarity with Black Lives Matter, with the Black folks who are working with them, the creatives they're supporting. How did you experience that? How did you experience seeing them all pop up in spaces, some seemingly unlikely?
Yeah. How did I experience that? That's a good one. I mean, I think some of it was like, it was weird, right? Because I was I spent most of the summer like out here in Colorado, which is a lovely place in its way, but is a few things. I mean, one, it's just like way less Black than like where I'm from, and so that was like, it was like weird to be like, okay, cool, like there are not many Black people like in the neighborhood where we live. We sort of live close to like the downtown and the college or whatever. But like there's a lot of Black Lives Matter signs. That's cool, I guess. There are also still Trump signs, so that's weird. But God bless, I don't know. So I think, that was just sort of a strange thing to like contend with, to be like on my jog or like walking around and being like, okay, cool. Like, I guess this house supports Black Lives Matter. Maybe no one in the house, but the house, I guess.
The house itself, the structure.
Yeah, made this political stand. And then, so that was interesting. And then I also think like part of it was, I have publications that have like never ever hit me up who apparently know who I am. So it's not just a matter of like, ignorance or we weren't aware of this person's work or whatever. Being like, do you want to write an essay about like, like dispatch from where, from niggerdom is the only thing I can. That's really where they want to dispatch from. They don't really give a shit about like it being in Colorado specifically. They're just like, dispatch from Blackness. And in a lot of those things, I had to sort of be like, yeah, no, I'm good. Not because I didn't, like it's cool. I'm like, yeah, I kind of want that look, like that'd be interesting. But I'm also like, I'm sleepy and I'm like a little traumatized, and like I kind of just want to like take a nap and process that, and not like process that in some way that is like consumable for like, presumably a majority non-Black audience. And because also I think part of the thing that trips people up about this kind of stuff is and that I find sometimes frustrating, sometimes funny, really a combination of both, is like, y'all know I've been Black this whole time, and y'all know stuff like wild stuff happens constantly. And so the thing about the like Floyd piece or Breonna Taylor, like all of these sort of tragedies, is like I want to sort of tell the white folks in my life is like, I'm constantly traumatized in this way. It's just that it happened to rise to your attention. But I'm like, like I'm from a city where the police department is notorious for murdering Black people. is notorious for like putting hands on folks, right, in ways that are inappropriate. Like they tortured people for decades. Like they had to straight up pay reparations for torturing people and put it in like the school curriculum. And so like these things aren't like hypothetical questions for me, and they never really have been, right? They never have been like, oh, now more than ever in times like these, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, it's always times like these for me. So I don't know. I'm just, which doesn't like, I don't mean to make light of it or to sort of dismiss it then as like, as a real thing that people are feeling and that I'm feeling, but it's just to say like, yeah, I don't know if like, yeah, if people recognize the sort of the deep insult of thinking that things are at a particular kind of high point right now, right? I don't know if they realize all of the erasing that happens when that is the frame, right? When that's the sort of framing.
Oh, erasure. It's such an intense subject and experience in this moment, and even down to thinking about how you're like, you know, the house says Black Lives Matter, but I don't know about the occupants of that house, and what a statement around, oh, we want to support you right now, actually how that erases the experience or even the relationships that you had built up with these folks up until this point. Like, hadn't you seen me in pain before? You just wiped all of that out to address this new moment. Which then, because I'm talking to a poet and have read your latest and love it, you write poetry in erasure too. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about the process of doing that kind of poetry, because the first time I saw it, I'll be straight up, I was like, oh, this is easy, and I'm not a poet. I may have worked with Maya Angelou, but I'm not a poet. I did not edit her poetry. So I was like, oh, this is easy. I can do this. Yo, do you know how hard to pull this off? Like, you're looking, you're like, I don't even know where to start. So can you give us, by way of starting with erasure, but then taking it wherever you like, but your process? How do you sit down to do this thing? How do you know when it's complete? How do you know when it's ready to share?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the thing that I'm always trying to like think about is whatever like the set of rules or set of conventions are in the space that I'm working, right? And so that could be, oh, I'm trying to write a sonnet, or oh, I'm trying to teach a college class or whatever, right? Whatever the sort of conventions are of that space. And then I'm trying to think about like what are the kind of, what's behind the form, right? So like behind just like this, like there are ideas embedded in the way that we approach certain things, right? So like, for example, in the sonnet, if we think about it as a kind of structure, right? The sonnet is a little argument, right? That's I think literally kind of what the name comes from. It's like little song, little argument. But like, and that's why it has like the volta, the point after which everything must change, right? It's why you have in a Shakespearean sonnet that sort of like epiphany that happens in the last couplet, whatever. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess when I think about erasure, part of what I think about is like, okay, we're using this document or we're using this sort of source material. But how do we get to like what's actually really behind it, right? Like what sort of lives in the like bones of it, in the sort of skeleton of it. And how do we like bring that to the fore in a different kind of way? Which in some ways, for me, is an interesting kind of proposition, because I think that is, I tell my students all the time that like, I think poetry, maybe more than other kinds of writing, is a discipline of noticing. And so if we're in the noticing discipline, like you know, like part of the job of someone who notices is to excavate, is to like point out. And so that's, yeah, I mean, that's like ultimately like the work of the erasure.
Okay. Poetry is not the only kind of art you produce.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about writing plays and what drove you to do that? Why poetry either wasn't enough or was more than enough to lead you into another discipline?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'd always been interested in playwriting and in writing for drama. And I mean, some of that might just be like that you know, I started out as like a performance poet and as a rapper. And so like what I mean to say when I say those things, I started out as a performer, right? I started out like as someone who thought of like the stage as the venue, the sort of publication venue of my work, right? More than a journal or the physical book or whatever. Um, yeah, and so and so in some ways, like theater was a kind of natural arc to that. Like I remember a homie of mine once telling me years ago, like a sort of mentor figure, being like, "Look, you can go around the country and like do, you know, poetry readings for like for nickels or whatever, or you can write down all the witty banter that you have in between your poems and make it a one person show and charge 10 times as much." um which I always thought was funny. And it's not, you know, it wasn't just that simple for me. Like I never did the kind of one person show thing because I couldn't wrap my head around that form. but but yeah, I don't know, I've always like loved the theater. And when we got a chance to do the Miss Brooks play, it was kind of cool because yeah, because it was this marrying, and because like the people we worked with, it was they do this sort of like shadow puppetry theater. And so it got to be this like really dynamic form where there was live music that was like being built by Jamila and Ayanna Woods. And then there was yeah, so there was like the live music dimension, the puppetry that was really cool, like what the actors could sort of do with all of those things, and what we could do, right? And because of the sort of puppet nature of it, we got to have a lot of input on the sort of visual language of that Brooks play. That was really fun. And so that kind of like got me into it. And then I've been sort of lucky that I've been able to, you know, to have other sort of, you know, bites at the apple.
I like that your real venue for performance was the stage before it was a journal or a book. So that makes me want to ask, how did you know then that you were ready for a book? Like there are a lot of folks who, you know, okay, I love to write and I'm going to write a book, but don't really know why they want to do that, except for, oh, that seems like a cool thing to do. Like I want to see my name in print on a volume. Um, but it's a little bit more than that, I think, or in my opinion, it should be a little more than that, a little more substantive. So can you tell us how you knew that, okay, a book is the next step for you?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I have a complicated relationship with books. I think everyone does, maybe. But I think so my senior year of college, I remember I did this independent study with one of my professors, right? Um, and the sort of like theme of the independent study was like, okay, we're gonna talk about like hip hop and poetry. This is like an old white professor, knew nothing about rap music, nothing about hip hop culture, but we just had a relationship, and so he was like, yeah, I'll do this with you. But basically what it would be is like we would sort of argue, or I'd have these kind of like one-sided diatribes or whatever, and then he would just ask questions. So he'd be like, and I remember one time saying like, yo, look, man, black people have a complicated relationship with books. Like, why would we trust books? That doesn't make any sense. And he was like, huh? What does that mean? Like, say more. Like, and so I wrote this essay then, thinking about it and like drawing. I think, what did I? It was named after like that Dead Prez song, "They Schools." It's sort of about um, the kind of racism that happens in educational spaces. And I think of books as like key in that thing, in that work. And I'm like, yo, like Notes on the State of Virginia was a book, man. So like anyone that's like, yeah, this is like a complicated form for like Black folks in America, like Notes on the State of Virginia was a book. So like you gotta, and it's never been out of print. So yeah, so absolutely it's complicated. But I think for me, the book was like, it was kind of strategic in the sense that like, one, I think I had a story, you know, I had like particular arcs I wanted to sort of see completed. And, you know, just as a matter of time, like you're never going to get as much time on a stage as you do like in a book. Yeah, so like that. So yeah, so it was a space to like be able to explore in this broader way, but even beyond that, I think that, you know, books carry culture beyond the person who's carrying the culture. And I do see some value in that. Both like, yeah, because like my book will enter spaces that I can't or that I won't, just, you know, such as the nature of a thing. But also like my book presumably, at least it has an opportunity to like outlive me, right? Or to outlive my ability or interest to like perform in that way, right? Because let's say like I'm getting an accident tomorrow and I'm like, you know, I can no longer speak or I can't move in some of the ways that I move or whatever, then maybe my kind of arc as a performer then is over, right? But not if there's a book, right? The book can still kind of perform in those ways.
Yeah. How did you go about making it happen? How did you find your way into a book deal?
Yeah. I mean, I think sort of maybe, I don't know, stupidly, but like, in some ways I realized that back in the day, like there was a lot of presumption in how I like moved, which I think was good. I think it was helpful because like there were things I didn't know were like unreasonable to want. And so I was like, yeah, I have a book. And I was like, yeah, I applied to graduate school coming out of college, largely because I just like wanted the time to be able to write that thing and focus on it and not have to like, yeah, like have that be able to live as like one of my primary focuses professionally or whatever. And so I did that and like I got in. It was so random. I applied to 2 places and like was waitlisted at both and then got into Michigan. And so, you know, got to like step into that space. And yeah, I think that there were things I just had learned. And maybe this comes also from like coming out of the slam and coming out of a performance background is like, and like I was used to failing. I was used to like not getting things that I sort of wanted for. And I think it's because I had I wasn't like one of the people who came into the slam and was immediately successful and wildly successful the whole time. It was a real march up. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just start sending stuff to like journals and things because that seems to be what people around me are saying to do. And then when I had enough poems, I was like, well, I guess I'll put together this manuscript and send it around. And I kind of like, you know, I think for a lot of my like colleagues, you know, who maybe came in with a little more, with just a different position in the work or a different relationship to the work, there was a lot more anxiety for the things, but I just didn't know enough to like be that frightened or to be like worried that, you know, that it wouldn't be accepted or wouldn't be accepted by the right people. I was just like sending stuff around. And so like got a chapbook published when I was still in grad school and then got like that like book deal, like it won a prize probably like, man, that must have been, it was like right after school. It was almost immediate. I was like one of the first people at the gate with like a real heavy duty publication. And it was just because I didn't know enough to be frightened. Like maybe if I had been less, like more smart, I wouldn't have gotten this far.
No, But there's also something, you put yourself in communities where, like, and I think about that, right? You were in Michigan to get your MFA, like you're in an area where, in an arena where people are, literary agents are coming to talk to you. Like you have an understanding of what it's going to take to enter this world. You're not daunted by it because you're also experiencing success in those worlds. Fair?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And I think I also, it was also good because like there are some ways that like that kind of program I think can be challenging for folks, right? And can like really mess with folks' confidence or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, I was lucky in that I had a lot of literary community outside of that space. And so that was always like really bolstering for me. So like we started the Dark Noise Collective my first semester at Michigan, right? With like, but I was the only one who had even thought about doing an MFA at that point. Um, and so it was really helpful to have, folks like Danae Smith and Aaron Samuels and Jamila Woods and, um, Fatima Oscar, Franny Choi, like had to have folks like that. And we're talking about how do we publish a book? How do we go on a tour? How do we do all these different things? And nobody else is like in the kind of, because like the thing about the MFA as a space is like it can become kind of small, right? But I was never that subject to that smallness because I just had a lot of outside relationships, and that was really helpful because yeah, yeah, yeah. So like those two things being able to sit next to each other, I got like the I got like the resources and some of the knowledge of being in the MFA program, and I didn't get the kind of psychosis of like, oh, if my workshop doesn't like this piece, or if I don't get along with people in the right ways, and I don't feel like I'm finding my trusted readers, that I'm somehow at a loss or I'm like behind. I'm not like the right kind of writer, which I think sometimes people can come out of those things feeling like. I was like, yeah, like if something misses for them, that's good information to have, but it's not necessarily determinative of like what I'm up to.
Community is so important. We were chatting with Nick Stone on Friday afternoon, and she was saying the same thing, that it's the community of writers that she has around her that energizes and infuses her work, gives her what she needs to keep going. Um, to that line, what kind of writing are you seeing too much of right now and wish we would just stop publishing?
Oh, that's interesting. Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I think, hmm. Well, I guess like the sort of like American Dirt type, like so like I think that there are these issues in our country. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking specifically about the U.S., but this could expand in some other ways and does. Where like there are these points in our society where we have these issues that are racialized or in these ways, and there's an impulse to humanize those situations, which I don't think is like a bad impulse, but often when we reach for that, or when we see the culture reach for that in terms of like cultural products, so i.e. books, TV shows, these kinds of things, um, we're often reaching for like how do we humanize the people who are in some ways more likely to wield more power or to be sort of like a certain kind of bad actor. So like, like I think about a show like say The Wire or something, and I'm like, I don't really know why I need to like get these get the sort of story of the police humanized in this way, when like I don't know, that just like isn't a thing that feels to me like all that useful. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of good on those. I'm good on like the like memoir from the border crossing guard, or like whatever, right? Like I was a, police chief for 20 years, or I was a prosecutor, and now I'm going to like tell you how we can like reimagine criminal justice in the country. I'm like good. I just feel like we have enough of that perspective. I think I'm all full. Me personally, let me speak for myself. I'm good. Yeah.
And so then what would you like to take its place? Because those things definitely are out there. What kind of writing are you not seeing, and or are only seeing tiny bits of, and you're like, no, I would love to see more of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this is just one thing I've been thinking about a lot is like, and maybe this comes out of like some of my recent reading. So I'm thinking about like the homie like Hanif Abdurraqib's book on tribe. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Dakota before we started. I kind of want to see more like good, like good work around hip hop, and specifically like memoir, because I just think that there are a lot of really interesting stories to tell about that space. And I don't know if a lot of people have done it, right? Like I can think of a handful of books, but like, yeah, like I don't know. I want like I want like someone needs to do the work that like Alex Haley was up to or something with like, with some of these great MCs, right? We got like the Rakim book last year, so that was cool. Was it last year? Within last year.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, and so that was cool, but I want like, yeah, I don't know. I like want memoirs from like people in that space. Like I want like a good like TLC memoir or something. I want like, yeah, like I want like, one of the dudes from Organized Noise to like talk, give us a book about like the origins of Goody Mob and Outkast, like, yeah, like that feels like, that would like make me excited. I don't know if any rappers like out here trying to write memoirs and want a co-writer. Holla at the boy. Like, what's up?
Got you. Okay, I'm glad you said that. We'll keep talking. There's so many things. I'm right. I mean, I'm right there with you. It was like you were speaking from my soul. These are the things. Not only did I write my own thesis about, but I was listening to or watching an engagement on Twitter, and someone was like, how come there aren't enough like well done research things that she was trying to write about? I think it was Outkast, which makes it 3 for 3. I've done 3 of these, Nate, and Outkast has been a centerpiece in each one of these conversations. And she's like, I'm trying to, get the theory behind all of this, and all I can keep finding is source material. And I just had to laugh because I was like, well, that's because that's all there is right now. Like, we haven't had enough time. Like, Andre 3000 and Big Boy are still alive. They're still making music. Like,
they're not very old, right? Like,
right.
Right. Like, their kids are like maybe just college age, right? Like,
right.
But they're their kids are like still on their insurance. So like,
exactly. And so it's like, how could you expect there to be anything else? This is something that's people's lives. Like, this is what we were literally living. But it is refreshing to see that now we are in a moment where we can have the time, the space, the resources, and the attention, right, to actually put some of these things together and begin to document and connect dots and look at, investigate the real meaning behind this incredible, powerful art form that definitely changed. Can't even say it changed my life. It made my life possible. I would literally not be where I am if it wasn't for hip hop. Literally paid for my education. I'm sorry?
What was your thesis?
I'll give you a guess. So I wrote my thesis on Midnight Marauders. It was called Midnight Marauders. Each chapter was a song. So it was an autobiographical essay collection about the intersection of my coming of age with Tribe's coming of age with that album, which was my POV. It was released on my 15th birthday, and my mom was managing Q-Tip at the time. So that was my deal.
What?
Yes.
Damn, you're like really from Queens. I love that.
Yes, I am.
That's the most Queens I've ever heard. Like, yes, my mother was the manager of Q. For Queens. That's great.
Gotta love it. Yeah, shout out to Rush, rest in peace, Chris Lady. Def Jam. I mean, yeah, so literally hip hop paid for my education, right? Let alone gave me a certain confidence to occupy any of those spaces. Like, okay, we have like technically 5 minutes left. I do want to make sure if folks would like to ask a question of Nate, please do unmute yourselves. I think our stage managers, thank you all for your help, are facilitating that, or you can drop it in the chat as we're going. Something about hip hop that I do think it's something I want as we do, retrospectives and think about the theory of this thing. I want to talk about misogyny, right? One of your poems is Everything I've Called Women. And I love this poem because it directly addresses this kind of tension, right? For those of us of a certain age who grew up in a culture where, and especially in hip hop, misogyny is the name of the game, right? That's just what you can expect. That's the way it is. And you cannot ascribe to it. You can wish it were different, but that's what it is. And you can laugh at it. You can enjoy it. You can whatever, right? But now this is absolutely uncalled for. If Slick Rick were releasing treat her like a prostitute now, like, come on, like, that's not acceptable, right? And so we know that, but I still listen to The Ruler Is Back, right? Like, I don't promote that in my daily living, but does that make me a hypocrite that I'm still gonna go and like, my favorite Jay-Z record is Who You With? Like, that's just the way it is. How do you, and so I would like to see art that actually grapples with this, right? Where the generations have actually had to flex our values. And I'd like to see us talk through this. How are you seeing this, and how are you actively negotiating this in your work?
Yeah, I write and think, I think a lot about gender, and a lot about like this question of misogyny. I mean, one, like I was the only growing up, like I'm the only boy in my family. Like I have 3 sisters. I was raised by like my mom, my grandma primarily. And so like, that's just like a certain, like that was sort of foundational for me. And it was really natural for me to think about a lot of the ways that I was sort of marked as different in my family as being a part of my gender, right? Both good and bad. And so it's a thing that comes up in the work. But yeah, I don't know. As it relates to hip hop, I think one of the issues that we always see with, or that we see with misogyny in the music is like people will sort of grow and shift over time, right? So I think about like, like Too Short, right? Who is sort of famously smutty, is like the dude that like, freaky tales, like all this shit. He's like, I talk pimp shit. Like that's what I do. Like in the last few years, there have been really interesting things of him, like in interviews. You can find stuff on like YouTube where he's talking about like consent and having this really sort of nuanced relationship to these questions that you're like, why is Too Short giving me like thoughtful elder statesman? But it's like, right, because he's the nigga old, like for 35 years or whatever, right? And so that is gonna like change how he approaches it, right? Or how you might approach it, how I might approach it. But like, the music is still, it's youth music, right? So my nephew stayed with us this summer. it can, for example, be easy for them to make like a cruel joke about queerness in a way. And it's because like, it's like, oh, right. But like, you know, I remember like Matthew Shepard. And so like that has a whole different weight for me, right? You know, like you don't have that knowledge. So, you know, how could I expect you to think about it this way, right? Because you also like don't remember a world where like gay people couldn't get married, right? Or like, yeah, like you don't, yeah, just like, yeah, you like my nephew, you don't remember a world where it would have been unthinkable for a woman to run for president. Like you don't, that doesn't occur to you that is like a possibility. And so when you think about the relative power that men and women have and what then is your responsibility as a young man, your answer will be understandably different, right? So I don't know. I guess like it's just interesting to me. It's like, but I'm always interested to see like the way that the next generation is like dealing with stuff and the way that like people are learning and growing, hopefully over time. Because sometimes I see a lot of these dudes like just double down on all the problematic shit they thought when they were 20.
Yep.
Which is just.
Yes. I tried, but I literally can't resist the urge to be like, well, yeah, also though, you know, Tribe, certainly I think of that Prodigy line, right? I'm only 19, but my mind is older. Like they were also 19. Now, granted, that did give them maybe some limits in their thinking, but they were delivering raps that had a certain sophistication that again would change music forever. So,
and I think that there is like an impulse towards sophistication now, but I don't think that sophistication for everyone that's not necessarily at the level of the lyric. It's like sonic. It's, you know, like guys are thinking, like folks are thinking in really complicated ways about like the sound, how they approach from a sonic level, but they're not necessarily in the same way. Like when I was young and I was trying to write, like I was obsessed with like how do I make these intelligent, complex rhymes? Like that for me was where the innovation was, and I think it's somewhere a little different for a lot of young people now, and I think that's okay. You know.
Yeah, that was brilliant. We have had an hour, so thank you again. Are there any closing words you would like to leave with us?
No, this is really fun. This is great. I'm just glad I got to like have my like Black thought.
Me too.
This is like my you know, my evangelical word. So I'm glad I got to share this sermon from the Book of Thought. No, it's been a pleasure, Porscha. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nate. Thank you again, Afropunk. Thank you, Penguin Random House. I can't imagine where I would be without you. And thank you all for being here and joining with us this morning. We hope that you have a beautiful day and be safe and well out there. Bye, Nate.